if I'll be moving a little bit from, but I find a way of bringing it to your debate. It's a 1.5 question and a comment. First, to give maybe a case whereby you say this country or this society seems to be doing what you are advocating for, which is very good, and I support it very much, to say, okay, maybe this country have tried to reach this particular way of dealing with this issue. They are not following this inequality kind of syndrome. And time to that, that's my first part, if you have that. And then the other question is to bring your debate onto the international arena with nation states. As you mentioned that capitalism is good and there are positive issues, the capitalist countries who have succeeded, if they coalesce in one way or the other to societies or nation states about that capitalism, it becomes cohesion. What would you advocate for? Wouldn't it be better if non-capitalist society experiences itself that this is not working, so let us change, than somebody trying to make strings tight so that you choose the system they want? If I am to name an example, I can put societies like Cuba, I can put societies like, I don't know if Venezuela enters in there, but Cuba is an example, and some African states, to say, can they experience?
So is the question kind of, should we invade Cuba to force them to be capitalist?
Yeah.
My answer is no. Not because I don't think that would be good for Cuba, I think it would be great for Cuba, but because I wouldn't want my son to die in a war with Cuba to make Cuba better. It's just too expensive. And I don't want to spend my money on freeing Cuba. Cuba is Cuba's problem, not my problem. But freedom is good. Freedom is good for Cuba. Freedom is good for Venezuela. Freedom is good for every country that tries it. And I don't believe in using force to do it, but I do believe in using persuasion to do it. I believe that we should be exporting the ideas of capitalism, the ideas of individual rights, the ideas of freedom, individual liberty and individual freedom, to every country in the world. And I travel to large parts of the world trying to do that, trying to convince me. I mean, I have to do it in America and in Europe as well, because they don't believe in it anymore either. I mean, there is no capitalist country in the world today, particularly as the last bastion of country of capitalism, Hong Kong, descends into China and away from capitalism. So, I believe that we have to advocate for these ideas. I don't believe we should bring them onto people by force, although there's no question in my mind that if we did that, they would be better off. It's just that it's too expensive and it's not justifiable to do it. The ideas work, and most societies don't learn it. And we think about societies learning. What about all the people who die in the meantime? All the babies in Venezuela who are dying because of starvation right now. All the people who have to leave their homes and are refugees in Colombia or in Brazil because they can't make a living in Venezuela and they're starving. What about all those people? While the society learns the lesson. Learning the lesson is very, very painful. It's violent in and of itself, right? So, if somebody went in there and cleaned it up for them, maybe they'd be better off. Particularly in a place like Venezuela, where I think it wouldn't be that hard to do. But and I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, you have to think about whose incentive it is and who has an interest in doing it. But the Venezuelans should welcome it because they've got a corrupt, collectivist, kleptocrat stealing all their money and denying them the ability to be free and to eat. So people suffer when you don't have capitalism. People in Cuba are poor and suffer, and they're political prisoners in jail, and it's a horrible, horrible place. So, don't you want? I want to liberate it. Again, I don't want to send troops in, but I would like to see it liberated. I'd like to see people free. I'd like to see people pursuing happiness.
My bone of contention will be like, how did you reach to the point of saying capitalism is good? It's because you experience it.
No. I mean, no, because to some extent I haven't experienced it, because I don't think capitalism really exists in the world. No, I've studied history. And history is available to everybody. History is available to Venezuelans. History is available to Cubans. History is available to Africa. History is available to China. You can look at history and you can evaluate. And history is very clear. The closer an economy comes to capitalism, the better it does. The closer it becomes to socialism, the worse it does. Direct correlation. And you can even look today at the Economic Freedom Index, and you can rank countries based on economic freedom, and you can measure it relative to wealth. And for the most part, there's a high degree of correlation. So this is not some mystery that you have to live it, right? Because if you had to live it, then nobody would ever become a capitalist, because what happened to the first one, right? How did the first one become a capitalist? How did the American founders of America know freedom was good? They never experienced it. They had a king. But they knew, theoretically, they knew that it was the right thing, and they fought for it. And I'm saying, I know that freedom is good for Cuba. Cuba has to fight for it. People have to fight for it. I mean, the question is, am I willing to fight for them? No. I'm willing to help them, but I'm not willing. They need to fight for themselves. But it requires a fight. And everybody, the knowledge that freedom and capitalism are good and work is available to every human being on the planet today. Oh, every is an exaggeration. Most human beings on the planet. Vast majority of them.
How do you
Say everybody is enslaved to everybody, yet this came about democratically. The free people in a free country voted for this kind of government, wanted this kind of legislation. Do you object to the democratic process?
I object to the idea that people have the right to vote on everything. The traditional American system was a system based on the idea that majority will prevailed only in public or political affairs, and that it was limited by inalienable individual rights. Therefore, I do not believe that a majority can vote a man's life or property or freedom away from him. Therefore, I do not believe that if a majority votes on any issue, that this makes the issue right. It doesn't.
All right. Then how do we arrive at action? How should we arrive at action?
By voluntary consent, voluntary cooperation of free men, unforced.
And how do our leaders arrive? How do we arrive at our leadership? Who elects? Who appoints?
The whole people elects. There is nothing wrong with the democratic process in politics. We arrive at it the way we arrived by the American Constitution as it used to be. By the constitutional process as we had it, people elect officials, but the powers of those officials, the powers of government are strictly limited. They will have no right to initiate force or compulsion against any citizen except a criminal. Those who have initiated force will be punished by force, and that is the only proper function of government. What we would not permit is the government to initiate force against people who have hurt no one, who have not forced anyone. We would not give the government or the majority or any minority the right to take the life or the property of others. That was the original American system.
When you say take the property of others, I imagine that you're talking now about taxes.
Yes, I am.
And you believe that there should be no right by the government to tax. You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation, regulation during times of stress, certain kinds of rent controls and things like that.
That's right. I'm opposed to all forms of controls. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy. Let me put it briefly. I'm for the separation of state and economics, just as we had separation of state and church, which led to peaceful coexistence among different religions after a period of religious wars, so the same applies to economics. If you separate the government from economics, if you do not regulate production and trade, you will have peaceful cooperation and harmony and justice among men.